Welcome to the brand new, first ever Nerdy Birdie success focused webinar series. So, if you didn't already know, this webinar series, we're showing you start to finish examples of successful integrations with our synthesized vendors and channel partners. So, it's one thing, obviously, to get an integration off the ground. We all know that it comes with its own challenges, but it's quite another to see it take flight. And so that's really the focus of the Nerdy Birdie. We're featuring guest speakers on vendor side, and then we're sharing their integration experience and that of MSPs with you all. So that way you can take full advantage of the synthesized billing module and that of your channel partners. So that's where we are going to take full flight. So again, this is our first ever. This is the first stab at the Nerdy Birdie, but join us every third Tuesday of every month. And this is where we're going to explore new vendor integrations, get to know that of our vendor partners, and exactly just getting into the nitty gritty with Nerdy Birdie. So without further ado, we're just going to go jump into a quick little synopsis of our agenda. We're going to just start with a few introductions, do a brief overview, get into the nitty gritty with Liongard, thanks to yours truly, Scott Davis, the lead sales engineer at Liongard. And if you do have any burning questions, Carrie, I'm going to jump you into chat here. Sullivan, you're in chat too. Again, this is really meant to be that of an informal webinar. This is definitely a kick of the can as to success focused. So we want to hear from you. Obviously, you are partners of both Gradient and Liongard, and if you're not, this is definitely a great overview for you to see firsthand how powerful these tools can be. And then on top of that, this is where, this is where we want to hear from you. So if you do, we want to hear the good, the bad, the ugly, as far as your implementation with Liongard, Gradient as a whole. We want to make that collectively better for you because we're in the business for you. We're in the business for MSPs. So that we're going to get into the nitty gritty with Scott in a moment here. And then we're going to just tie that into just overall successful implementations of Liongard, and then take a deep dive demo into Liongard and that of synthesized billing module, and kind of collectively bring that back, circle back, and then have some room at the very end for some Q&A. So these are all your burning questions that you have for myself or Scott. This is the time to speak up, and we'll get started with a few introductions. You obviously, I think you all know me. My name is Bryan Chapman, Manager of Partner Success at Gradient. I'm really dedicated to help you as an MSP realize the full value of the synthesized program. So that's where I fit in. I am a recovering MSP of 6+ years. I jump onto calls with all y'all, and I can only empathize with you. Right now, we have our billing module. Our synthesized platform will continue to grow to include other modules. I really have to bite my tongue as to what's coming down the pipeline, but really exciting things coming down. But ultimately, all things that are going to be tools for you as an MSP to realize your full potential, to maximize your profits, and us collectively be the single integration hub for the IT channel. So with that said, passing it along to the Nerdy Birdie himself, Scott Davis. It's all you.
All right. So, like me, a recovering MSP, just the same 6 years in the MSP space. Before that, I spent a lot of time in the enterprise IT side of things. In total, I have over 20 years of experience working with technology, working with cybersecurity. You can see there, I've done a lot of multi-year business planning, cybersecurity planning. Documentation is the name of the game. If you're not documenting, then you run that risk of losing aspects of it. And I think that's one of the reasons I ended up at Liongard, is because Liongard is that automated documentation component. At least when I signed up, that was the branding of it. Outside of enterprise IT and everything else, I still teach cybersecurity classes at Harrisburg University here in Central Pennsylvania. I am the lead sales engineer at Liongard. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll constantly see I'm constantly posting videos, helpful tips, and everything else to just help you grow better with Liongard. So before we jump into the demos, I just want to give a high-level overview of Liongard. Then I'm going to pass the baton back over to Bryan for him to kind of explain a little bit of the gradient piece. Then we'll jump into some demos. But when I look at Liongard, a lot of you, if you've sat through a sales pitch of Liongard, you probably are familiar with this slide here. But running that MSP is harder than ever. The IT stack has exploded, and there's more systems to manage than ever before. Not only that, but they're constantly changing. There's new versions, there's updates, and there's more. On top of that, users have access to thousands of different SaaS applications at their fingertips. And still today, they're getting deployed and installed without ever questioning or asking IT if it's okay to do so. All of this means there's a larger attack surface for MSPs to manage and higher risk for the data that companies are entrusting us to protect. Oh, your clients' expectations have probably increased as well. They want more for less, while you face the challenge of finding good talent and then being able to afford them. Plain and simple, it's harder than ever to run an MSP today. It's harder to train your new employees for all your clients. It's harder to keep your clients documented in that standardized way. It draws in this forced choice of satisfaction or profit. This forced choice of satisfying your customers, having the tech team put a ton of hours, working weekends, taking those 3 a.m. calls just to keep your customers happy, is killing your profits. When you choose to optimize your profits, this is where you see customers churn because you're not meeting their higher demands and those expectations. But even internally for your techs, it means choosing between keeping their customers happy and losing their sanity in the process, or maintaining their sanity but not keeping the customer satisfied. True story, the reason I got out of the MSP space is my wife came to me pregnant with our second child. She said, "You're gonna find a new job or you're gonna find a new wife." And I really like her. So I also made that decision to leave the MSP space, and I found myself on the dark side, if you will. But it's an impossible choice. But you and your team is living it today. The good news is that the best run MSPs have found a way to break free from this losing trade-off. They've found the operational advantage that lets them delight customers and maximize profit with automation. And in the end, helping your employees focus on what they should be doing, and that's being the problem solvers for the technical issues. No more documentation, no more auditing, the mundane tasks that you find themselves oftentimes are just skipping or not doing altogether. Liongard is going to inspect and document all of your systems from the cloud to the endpoint, transforming and centralizing all of that messy, hard to reach config data into a data asset you can trust. Liongard gathers this data automatically and alerts you when things change, so you're never caught by surprise. And then Liongard helps automate major workflows for your business, from automated documentation to billing reconciliation with integrations like Gradient MSP. By using Liongard, you're going to be able to unlock the operational advantage, and that comes from the deep data. So before we jump into the demo, I'm going to pass it back over to you, Bryan.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So bringing this full circle into that of Liongard and that integration with our billing module, formerly named Billable. This is already out of date, but hey, we're a startup and things move fast. But the fact of the matter is, this is as simple as it gets. So whether you're technical or not on the call, what we're doing, bottom line, is leveraging and piggybacking Liongard's inspector types. We're then creating custom metrics from the raw data print that's extracted from those inspectors. And then we're finding that source of truth. We're aggregating quantities per customer for the number of users, devices, whether you're taking advantage of, like, say, Duo or Sofo Central, Microsoft 365. There's so much data there that overall, this is where it's better together. Liongard truly is unified visibility into all of your managed systems. which is truly a first of its kind when it comes to reconciliation, because you can then finally extract those usages from those inspector types and then pull them into our billing module, map those to services that are that you resell in your PSA, and then reconcile. Ultimately, bottom line, so you get paid for everything you do, and we then can streamline that process altogether, saving you a lot of time and headache. Because I've been there for 6+ years, having to reconcile, pulling my hair out of my head. I think I grew a few gray hairs over the years. And I think I was in the same spot as Scott. Like, my wife's telling me, like, find a better job or at least try to find some automation here. But yeah, there was just nothing like it. So this is what truly is so unique about this integration. Liongard is so unique in itself, and to bring it full circle for you to then automate and help streamline your billing reconciliation process, that's fantastic. So this is where we're pulling that usage from custom metrics, mapping to services within our billing module, and then as soon as you pull and suck in that product usage, you can then review, reconcile, update all those additions, services in your PSA. So again, real simple overview, but for those that are unaware, that's what that looks like. So next slide there, Scott, is requirements. So I've seen through this past 1 to 2 months since we announced the Liongard integration that overall there's been some questions about, well, why isn't it connecting? Why isn't it pulling information? Well, there are bottom line some requirements. One, it doesn't, this is a requirement. This is more or less a recommendation of ours. A recommendation of it being a parent-child inspector. So when I say a parent-child inspector, this is where I like to think of those inspectors as like multi-tenant accounts, where they have, as soon as you deploy, say, Microsoft 365, and let that inspector run, it's going to go through its auto discovery and find all of those environments or systems that you manage. And then that's where you would then have to, in Liongard, map those those discovered systems to environments. So that's where we can then aggregate usage very easily per environment, because what we're doing in billing module is then mapping environments to accounts that are in your PSA. So we're sucking in all your accounts from your PSA, we're sucking in all the environments from Liongard, we're doing that mapping. So that way we can aggregate that usage per customer, per service, make your life a lot easier. Now, with that said, I'm not telling you you can't use parent-only inspector types. It's just that's going to be a little bit more tedious, because essentially you would have to create a custom metric per environment. You would have to be able to filter the customer from that one lump sum data print that has everything. It's all inclusive. There's no aggregations per customer. You have to filter that through JamesFast. So there is a way to do that, but overall it is a little tedious, because you would then effectively have to create a custom metric per customer for those parent-only inspector types. But thankfully, there are 37 plus parent-child inspector types available for you to leverage. Now, on top of that, map discovered systems to environments. I want to just say this because this is quite honestly one of those weekly, if not monthly, Liongard best practices, where you're going in, you're identifying, are your inspector types running? Are they healthy? Are your agents healthy? And then on top of that, are there any discovered systems that you haven't mapped to environments within Liongard? Because bottom line, you're going to go through this phase of onboarding clients. You're going to deploy even Liongard to your customer base. You want to make sure that you're doing a little bit of housekeeping on a weekly, if not monthly basis. And then on top of that, making sure that those environments are mapped to systems with synthesized billing module. So bottom line, we just want to make sure that you get paid for everything you do, so there's no money left on the table. And then coming full circle is that custom metric. For you to configure that Liongard integration for the first time, you do need that first custom metric. And when I say first custom metric, I mean a valid custom metric. I'm talking no arrays. We need a full whole number. So for those on the call that are not necessarily James Path experts, by no means, you don't need to be. You can, if anything, put it into layman's terms and jump onto Liongard support, jump into Gradient's support. We're here for you. So if you can't make end-to-end meet with a particular custom metric or inspector type, then feel free to reach out to us. We want to help you because we all know how complicated not only James Path but can be. But as soon as you add and roll in roar path commands, that's a next level. That's where you're then calculating through James Path, and that's in itself super unique to Liongard in itself. Hence the name. So this is where those requirements come together. That metric display doesn't need to be toggled to when you go to create your custom metric. And overall, if you get to the point where you want to leverage, say, Microsoft 365 or other metrics, take advantage of Liongard library. Take advantage of our sample metrics in our support center. Again, reach out to support. We're here to help. And then on top of that, we just want to make this experience as best as possible. Now, in saying that, I recognize that there's a few partners on this call right now that have some burning questions around our integration. Well, why aren't you pulling all of the product usage for this custom metric? Thankfully, we heard you and we were able to replicate that issue. So we're currently in development a hot fix, and that's set to be released either this week or sometime very, very soon. Thankfully, we were able to replicate that. So this isn't going to impact your next billing cycle, which likely is the 1st of August. So we're going to get that wrapped up and released really soon, that hotfix. So that way we can pull in all of your usage for those custom metrics, just an FYI. Because like I said before, no implementation is easy. And when we're talking about just how the depth and breadth of Liongard and this integration, what you could do to leverage and streamline billing reconciliation, that's where overall there are a couple of hurdles and hiccups along the way. We realize that, but again, this is why the Nerdy Birdy exists today, and this is where we're going to jump into more series every month with vendor partners of ours. So without further ado, I think we can just jump straight into our demo here, Scott. Again, I think we have some technical difficulties at the start. So I'm allowing everyone to talk. This is really meant to be an informal webinar. Jump into QA. The chat is disabled right now, so I apologize. But I allowed everyone to talk. So if anyone at any point wants to unmute themselves, speak up, interrupt Scott or I, please do.
All right.
Go for it.
Absolutely. So I'm going to jump in. I'm going to hit the demo first here. And I just want to highlight a couple areas that Bryan touched on. And first and foremost is that Liongard library. Because he's right. Not everyone out there is a James Path wizard. And if you were, I wouldn't go around admitting that in public. But if I come in here and just real quick, you want to see some of the things that Gradient has already done, typing in Gradient here in the search, what we're going to do, if I hit the right enter key, you can see Phil has been super active adding 40 metrics into the Liongard library. And that is absolutely great to see because all you have to do is say, hey, I do want to know webroot count of activated users. Come in here, copy the metric, take that right over into Liongard and paste that in. The other thing that I do want to highlight real quick is the Liongard Academy. So with Liongard Academy, you may not be that James Path wizard already, but we do have the how to write a metric learning path. It's 3 videos to help you write roar path, James Path, even better to get exactly the data that you're looking for. That's part of that flexibility of Liongard, giving you a lot of data and letting you choose what data matters to you as your MSP, and then setting the thresholds that matter to you as well.
Yeah, so, and I think that's where, like, sorry to interrupt there, Scott, but that's where like Liongard is, you only make it it's only what you make it, right? So because there's so much you can do with the platform, that overall just having that baseline understanding of custom metrics, James path, inspector types really kind of opens the door as to how to successfully implement the platform, right?
No, 100%. And it is crucial and it is key in just understanding the data that matters to you.
Hmm.
Now, inside Liongard, there's a couple things that I want to hit real quick. Because really, the main thing that we're demoing here today is the integration with the Nerdy Birdie, with the Gradient MSP, the billing or the billable module, I think, as you call it now. Um, Learning new vocabulary right on the fly. I like that. But there's a couple questions that I hear regularly from partners that I help with on the line guard side. And the two questions that I've gotten the most is one with the API. So if I come in here into my account settings and go into my access tokens, you do want to make sure that you are setting that API token and not trying to use an agent install token. If you're
Hmm.
trying to use an agent install token, it will not work with Gradient. The second thing that I commonly get is in admin metrics, and it's this display trigger right here. If that display field is not turned on, that data will not be viewable outside of line guard. So if I come in here and I'm testing this live, so hopefully I don't get the blue screen here. Um, let's see, gradient. Oh, not the inspector name. See, look at that. I knew I was going to type it in wrong. But here you can see some of them that I dropped in into our test lab. So you can actually search. If you have gradient at the beginning, you can see all of my gradients and all of my display fields are turned on. We also show you the query that's being used. So if you wanted to identify and track that to see exactly what data is being pulled, you can see that. So when we look at line guard, making sure the display field is on, making sure you're utilizing the right API, the rest of it really just simply comes down to the Gradient MSP tool. Now, before I hand the demo switch over, the one other thing that I do want to highlight is there are 73 different inspectors that are in production that you can pull data out of from those systems and populate that data inside of Gradient MSP. In addition to that, we do have some inspectors inside our preview and inside our labs area. Those are the roadmap items. These are coming. So definitely all of those data metrics can be built off of. Those metrics, when display is turned on, can be pushed over to Gradient, giving you a ton of capability and allowing you to cover pretty much your entire scope of products for your customers into Gradient MSP. So that's really all there is inside of Liongard to turn on, validate, and check. So Bryan, I'm going to pass the screen over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Again, thanks, Carrie, for jumping into QA. Chat is disabled. Sorry about those technical difficulties, but if you do have any questions, feel free to jump into the Q&A or unmute yourself. You do have the ability to do that and speak up, interrupt us. Again, this is really meant to be informal. We want to hear from you. So I'm going to share my screen here. And if you didn't already guess, I'm actually camping with my family, double booked myself. So I'm literally with the birds right now. So I am tethering to my phone, so bear with me. Okay, so I'm gonna jump straight into Gradient here. So I've already gone ahead and configured Liongard. I've gone through, I mapped my first service to my first custom metric, and bottom line, I'm pulling in those usages straight into our billing module here. I'm going to filter by the vendor tag, because as soon as you add or map a service to a custom metric within the Liongard integration or any integration within the billing module or that of the CSV import, we're going to be able to tag those vendors. So that way we can just make your life easier. So when you see the billing dashboard, you're not having to scroll on in trying to find those services in which you want to review and reconcile. You can just do that from the vendor tag itself. In case you didn't know, we can actually change the unit of measurement here if you needed to. You can change the actual vendor tag from the dropdown. And yes, it is a partial dropdown because we can't list all 1,000 vendor partners out there. So if it's just a brief little search here, you should be able to find that. There you go. So if you do want to just go in there after the fact and override those vendor tags, you can do so. On top of that, too, in case you didn't know, is we also have those distributor tags. So if you have Pack State or any of those other distros that you resell, not only Microsoft, but other things like SentinelOne and Duo, etc., it doesn't matter. That allows you to then take those service offerings appropriately and again filter those out so you can just make your life easier. So what we see on screen is just effectively the status symbol indicating next to the actual service offering that this mapping is live. It's good to go. There's no issues. If you do have any issues, this will be identified in red. So you can then go back into the configuration itself and then troubleshoot those custom metrics. So bottom line, obviously this is huge swings, just for demo purposes, of course, but you'll be able to review those numbers and reconcile. Some of the questions that I often get is like, they configure the integration and let it sit. The thing is, this is your sandbox. For you to free to play around with the Liongard integration, validate those usages that are coming through from those custom metrics, and ultimately play around with those CSVs too for those things that otherwise you might have difficulty in pulling in through Liongard. This is where, again, this is your sandbox. It's not until you actually action these service cards will we update that service for that particular customer in your PSA. So this is where we're currently looking at premium user support. We map that to a custom metric, say from Azure Active Directory, and then boom, one click reconcile immediately updates your PSA, your client contract for you. So you can do the multi-select, and of course, you can avoid that just because this is a test instance. But the idea here is you can just multi-select and approve. Now, to get take full advantage of this, obviously, there's some weekly and monthly best practices to that of Liongard as well, in the sense that we want to make sure that you're not leaving any money on the table. So for those, it's kind of a recommendation that I would propose is updating your account mappings, jumping in here, making sure that all your accounts are mapped to environments within Liongard. So if you do go through an onboarding of, say, a new client in the past 30 days, you've done your due diligence and mapped that discovered system within Liongard to that environment. Well, this is where you're going to go in here and make sure that environment is mapped to that account within your PSA. Again, so we can then pull that aggregated unit count from those custom metrics for that particular account. So this is where you'd be able to see here if there was any unmapped. This toggle is on by default. So if you untoggle that, you're going to see all of your mapped customers. If you ever do need to go in here and unmap them, you can do so. Maybe you went in here and unintentionally mapped this to the wrong customer. You can then do a partial search here. There you go, mapped, boom, done. So this is where we're trying to map these automatically for you. But if there is not an exact match, this is where you're going to have to go in, do your partial search, scour for that account within your PSA and map those accordingly. And then on top of that, as far as the updating of service mappings, this is where you can go in here and map. You can go crazy mapping services from your PSA to that of custom metrics. So this is another unique feature of the Liongard integration in the sense that, obviously we don't expect that you have all of your vendor partners integrated with Liongard. What's really, and that will come, right, Scott? I mean, the idea there is Liongard is going to be integrating with all your vendor partners and us too. But the idea here is that this is where we can then, for instance, if you do have a particular vendor of yours that is really, really difficult to pull that custom metric, maybe they don't even support that of a usage report or a CSV export, this is where you can leverage the inspector types that are currently available within Liongard to map to those particular services that are just rather difficult to reconcile in the first place. So this is where, taking advantage of Azure Active Directory, Google Workspace, Microsoft 365, finding your source of truth, because bottom line, every service that you resell is likely consumption based. So that unit of measurement is either gigabytes, per user, per device, workstation, server. It doesn't matter. Those units of measurements are pretty much the same across the board. So that way you can then map whatever service to that source of truth custom metric from that inspector type, and go hog wild. So this is where you can then go in here. Okay, I have a network device count, or maybe I'm doing a server count. Maybe you do have inconsistency across your PSA. You're just doing whatever it takes to get that invoice out, and then you're in turn making a mess of your product catalog, making a mess of your client contracts. This is where I was notoriously really bad at my previous job as an MSP, because again, I was just trying to punch invoices out over across like 200, 300 plus customers. And again, you're then falling into this hole where you're just have overall just inconsistencies with your resale stack and whatnot. So this allows you not to only map those services that are difficult to then suck in those usage reports, but ultimately those services where you just have inconsistency. Maybe it's like, say, Sentinel-1, and you have Sentinel-1 complete, but you have that over across multiple SKUs within your PSA. This is where you can then in turn find again your source of truth. Maybe that is your Sentinel-1 custom metric. We're pulling in the total active licenses for Singularity Control. I know that all 4 of these SKUs within my PSA mean the same thing. So I'm going to map those all to that one custom metric. Boom, boom, boom. Oops, I just lost that. I'm going to hide that. I'm going to find that custom metric. There you go. And again, I'm going to map all 4 of them to that single custom metric. Oh, I lost my screen here. Bear with me. There you go. So as you hover over these things too, just from the mapping, you'll be able to see what services from my PSA are mapped to that single custom metric. Again, there's a lot of flexibility here to really identify those inconsistencies, as well as those vendors that are just typically very difficult to work with. So once that's all said and done, you'll return to configuration, and you'll be able to see all those mappings from the configuration itself. We're going to be able to pull those usages in and make sure that you have a healthy metric. Now, if you do run into issues where you do see those metrics not connecting, there's a couple troubleshooting steps that you could take in order to, before you even jump onto the support line with Gradient or that of Liongard, is again, we'll jump into Liongard in a second here, but one straight off the bat is making sure that you have an aggregated whole number for that custom metric. That custom metric, that query result, cannot be an array. It has to be a whole number. So I'll touch on that in a second. But again, when you do update service mappings, or you're coming into the reconciliation, the billing module here at the end of the month, as close to your invoice cycle as possible, you're wanting to, the best practice for me that I encourage the partners that I work with is to jump into the PSA configuration in the top right hand here. Next to your profile name, you can hit that clog, you can go to PSA configuration, you can sync now. The only reason that I say that is because our PSA sync right now is set to every Saturday. So technically speaking, something could be changed, whether it be through an active integration that you already have pre-existing within your PSA, or there's someone that is just getting a little too click happy, getting ahead of the game, and like changing things in your client contracts. We want to be able to pull in those active unit counts from your PSAs across all your client contracts. That being said, we also want to do the same as well. Obviously, this Liongard integration is live, but again, we want to make sure that we're pulling in that the right usage. So again, PSA sync, do your sync now in the Liongard integration. Again, just giving you peace of mind knowing that you 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 pulled in all the accurate counts not only from your PSA but from Liongard as well. And then this again where you're going to be able to review those updates. As I mentioned earlier too, we have that fix currently in development, and that's going to be a hot fix for those that are experiencing mapping multiple custom metrics and it not actually pulling all of the usage. This is a known issue, and we're currently in development. We're hoping to have that released in by no later than this week. Really, we're trying to make that a high priority. Well, we are. So that again, not to interfere with your billing cycle this month. So with that said, I mean, like I can jump into Liongard, but I do want to hear from y'all. So if you do have any questions, feel free to jump in here. One thing before I even get into the Q&A is overall just health of your metrics. So this is where I want to just highlight a couple of troubleshooting steps. Again, I'm just going to look for one that we had previously made. I'm going to jump into this AVIC online switches count. I'm going to select that child because again, the parent data print, for those that don't know, the parent and child data prints sometimes are a little different. So ultimately, we want to make sure that we're reviewing that of the child inspector or the child environment, the system, whatever you want to call it. So that's where we can then select one of your managed systems, i.e. one of your customers. And this is where we're going to review that data print. And so the idea here is we're obviously looking at online switches for AVIC. So we get a count of 8 for this particular customer. But again, the query result, I want to highlight this. This is what we want to see. We don't want to see no query. And if it's a query, it's usually within square brackets within the query result. We don't want to see that. We want to see a whole aggregated number so we can then effectively pull that into synthesized billing module. That's just a really quick tip troubleshooting step there, just in case you do run into any issues. James Path is really flexible too. So if you do need to throw a data print, like an aggregated unit count from the data print to that of an array, only to then calculate it, you can do that. You can even throw that array to a number if you wanted to. There's a whole whack of expressions and overall calculations. And again, like I mentioned, roar path commands. I believe we had a couple of customers or partners of ours that have taken advantage of roar path commands to then pull the overall consumption or extra cloud storage for that of Sophos Central as an example, or Datto BCDR. There's lots of flexibility there, but this is where, again, you don't have to be a James Path expert. Obviously, like Scott had alluded to earlier, it's in your best interest to jump into that of the Liongard Academy and get the bottom line base knowledge. But again, if you do run into issues with those James Path queries, feel free to reach out to Gradient or our friends at Liongard. Our support is awesome. They have awesome response times, and you usually should be able to hear from them within, a few minutes. So that's the case here. And then on top of that, I mentioned previously too, is your weekly and monthly Liongard best practices is making sure that your inspectors are in good health, that you have no issues across the board, all your agents are healthy, there's no failures, because again, we want to make sure that you're pulling in that correct usage. And again, on top of that, making sure that if you do deploy any inspectors, making sure that you have mapped all your discovered systems to that of environments within Liongard. Again, we don't want you to leave any money on the table, and we want to maximize those profits. And this is where all of that collectively comes together, and this is where our billing module, the integration with Liongard, is really can be overwhelming to start, but as you get familiar with not only Liongard, and again, digging into exactly the data you require, this is where you're going to take wing and really see the full potential of not only Liongard, but our platform as well. And again, hashtag better together, because we are. But I'm going to stop my sharing my screen. Maybe it gives some time here for some Q&A. I'm gonna see here. I'm gonna hide this, see if I have any questions come in. Again, our chat is disabled, so please jump into Q&A here. Feel free to unmute yourself if you need, if you do have any burning questions. And then, yeah, just to fill some space here too, Scott, I think we've kind of collaborated on a few other questions on your side. Just overall, some questions come my way is successful implementations of Liongard. I know that there's a couple of partners on this call that are just getting their feet wet. So how would you, what's your best advice, your best insight, best practices into not just throwing the kitchen sink at everything in Liongard, but just, or is it throwing the kitchen sink and then scaling back? Like, how would you, if there are any partners out there that are eagerly wanting to implement Liongard and take full advantage of all the inspector types and whatnot, all the actionable alerts and reports, what would you say is the best advice for them?
Yeah, definitely. If you're going through onboarding, it's super simple. Follow the advice that you're going to get through our Smart Start onboarding setup. We're going to walk you through step by step, helping you understand what you really need to be successful with Liongard in a production state. If you're already past that state and you're like, yeah, I've gone through that a year ago, but I'm still really not quite there, look at what actionable alerts give you today.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I've always done is I had an onboarding template that I had every actionable alert inside Liongard turned on for. And when I onboarded a customer, I was getting all of these alerts. Now, I was only doing it inside Liongard only. I wasn't getting those alerts into my PSA, didn't need to bombard the ticket queue. But really seeing a scope of everything that's potentially wrong, everything that's potentially triggered,
Mm-hmm.
but utilizing those actionable alerts. The root of it all, you have to have the data inside of Liongard. If you don't go and throw the kitchen sink into setting up those inspectors, spend the 3 hours, spend the 4 hours, spend what it takes to get that customer inside of Liongard. Get the agent installed, get their servers in there, get the firewall, your switches, if there's Synology NAS devices, get Active Directory, get your SQL Server inspectors, get your cloud services, the fire, go through all of the different inspectors that Liongard can collect data for, get that data flowing into Liongard. Because the alerts can be sitting there, but if you don't have the data in for the customers, the alerts aren't going to help you at all.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And then on top of that, I've heard overall, there's been some questions surrounding custom metrics and inspectors. Can we calculate or link two inspector types or metrics together? Is there a way of doing that?
There is not currently a way of evaluating or combining a internet domain and an SSL inspector together. I hear our team is working on some ROAR paths to allow you to do similar things.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And then how do you filter overall different arrays in inspector type? I know that there's you could get yeah, as soon as you look at that data print, it sometimes is overwhelming. There's a lot of data that's been extracted from those inspector types. But for you to filter, slice and dice those data prints, is there like an easy way, a quick gotcha in filtering overall different arrays? So maybe you have a device array, a user array, and you're trying to filter and slice and dice those particular data prints. Is there a way of doing that?
So I'm gonna reverse engineer this almost, or use the term reverse engineering because that's what I did. I
Yeah.
would go into my test environment and I would say I want to track this metric. I would go in, I would change it in my environment, rerun the Liongard inspector, go to the data print for the new inspection, export that into a text document,
Hmm.
find what I changed, and then I knew the path that it was sitting in. And
Yeah.
from there, I was able to reverse engineer the James path. I was able to then capture, but you have to understand what data you want,
Hmm.
because Liongard is so flexible. If you start on a journey of, well, I think I want it to look like this or this, you're going to have issues. But,
Hmm.
being concise, one of the best things that I've used it for is taking my SOC 2 questionnaires or taking my PCI questionnaires and saying, okay, this is the data exactly that the questionnaire is asking for. This is the data I need to provide. Go into Liongard, find what data I can capture that checks those boxes, building those metrics, and then ultimately putting into a report. So it's a one click done, and I have my PCI report. I have my SOC 2 report.
Yeah, that's great. And I think for those unaware, um, you can go into those custom metrics and download that data print. So this is where you can overall, if you're tired looking at this table or trying to find exactly, oh, I'm looking at this object within this components array and I'm trying to find that data. I know it's there, but like I'm gonna sit here trying to open up this tree just to try to find the bloody thing. So this is where, like you said, Scott, downloading the data print is definitely a really good use case for you then to do that find and search exactly for those particular those that data that you're looking for. So that's a way for you to then reverse engineer that, so to speak. So yeah, and then on top of that, just some other questions that I overall hear coming in from our partner base. Not to put you on the spot, but you are the nerdy birdie. So, um, there's overall some questions around just inspector types in general, parent-child inspector types. Obviously, this is where our recommended best practices is using those parent-child inspectors, but how can we take advantage of those parent-only inspector types for that of pulling in that usage and then bringing it into synthesized billing? I know overall, mentioned previously at the very start of this webinar, we could take advantage of those parent-only inspector types so long as you're able to filter those customers within the data print, so you have an aggregated count per environment or customer, and then essentially you would have to make a custom metric for each. But the great thing there, even if you were to go down that path, it might be a one-shot deal. So where you could then copy and or duplicate those custom metrics and throw in that quick little filter for that custom metric. But is there any other way of taking advantage of those parent-only inspector types and bringing that into that synthesized billing module? Is there any other alternatives that you can think of?
Well, I think it comes down to identifying the data that matters.
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, that's really where it's going to come down to, is identifying what data you're trying to report. I go back and I can put my MSP hat here. I'll even put my MSP hat on here for a second. And, I got my MSP hat on.
Nice.
Mr. MSP. Yeah, these were great hats, by the way. But I put my MSP hat back on, and I wanted billing to be as simple as possible. We were billing by device, but then we switched over to billing per user. And a lot of times, we grouped in, all infrastructure with that expense. Depending
Hmm.
on how detailed your billing is, that's where it comes into, okay, you have to identify, okay, I have a Sonic wall, this is how many Sonic walls I have. Okay, I have Meraki, this is how many Meraki devices I have. There
Hmm.
is a lot of data inside of Liongard, and there's a lot of value. There's one inspector in particular that I like to point out that's often missed, and the reason it's missed is because it's in our beta section. So if I come in here preview, there's this inspector called the Roar inspector. This is that Liongard inspector. So I can come in here, look at my parent level, top tier of it, and what it's going to do is it's going to break down all of everything that's going on inside of my Liongard instance. It's showing me how many users, how many groups, how many agents. I can dig down into the environments and kind of see, okay, is IT glue, is ConnectWise, is what's visible, what's not. Digging into your launch points, your integrations, and really getting more insight on exactly what's happening, and also utilizing this inspector. I think you mentioned it earlier. You have to make sure your data is accurate. That's why you go to an automation tool. But let's be honest, even a good Graph API setup, eventually that great Graph API key may terminate. With Microsoft 365, the best practices, I think, is every 6 months you're supposed to refresh that Graph API key. If you forget to go back in and recreate that, the Liongard Roar inspector actually can trigger an alert and say, hey,
Mhm.
Microsoft Graph API is failing now. You should be aware of that and go take a look at it. So there's a lot of different things that are inside of Liongard in different places. And again, it comes down to what data is it that you're searching for. If you're having trouble find it, reach out to the Liongard support team. We're more than happy to help you. And if the data is not there, that's why we provide that ideas portal so that you can get that idea in front of our dev team. And as we're going through and refreshing that inspector, hopefully get that included.
Yeah, no, that's great. One last question for you, and this is like a burning question of mine, is I get this asked a lot, and this is in regards to Gradient as a whole too, because we often we're a new startup, we're throwing up new ideas out there, and overall things sometimes get out of hand. Channel marketing sometimes gets ahead of themselves, but success is here to bring them back down to ground. But this is where, like, just even internally, this is where overall we've seen some confusion over Gradient. And that way, and I'm sure that you hear this too with Liongard, just because it's so ambiguous of an idea. It's just so, it can be complex in just trying to make ends meet. And as far as like, well, grading as a whole is the integration hub for the IT channel, but then we have solutions or modules to help you as an MSP. So in layman's terms, in like a quick pitch, like Liongard, for those that are currently on the call or rewatching this, and they're maybe evaluating Liongard, maybe they're reevaluating Liongard, I don't know, or maybe they're just they're already a partner, they're already well implemented, but they still haven't really fully experienced the value there, or not the value, but the extended value, I should say. What would you say to those that are in that position right now? Like, how would you go about explaining Liongard and really ultimately just make sure that they get the most out of the platform? Again, rather than just throwing the kitchen sink. And again, I think we kind of alluded this times and times, just making sure that you reverse engineer, getting to the data that you need, but ultimately, like, in your best words, like, explain Liongard um, for me.
So yeah, I mean, Liongard is that living system of record for you. It's for that deep data platform that is going to automatically go out, inspect your customer environments from your cloud to the endpoint. And when I say it automatically inspects, I'm saying it's automatically bringing that data into Liongard, where the intelligence and flexibility of Liongard is going to allow you to audit it to make sure it stays within your best practices. And if the
Mhm.
threshold that is your best practices exceeds, that's when we're generating that alert. And we're generating the alert at the priority level that you want. So if it's a critical, high, medium, low, whatever, then putting that alert in the places that you need it. Is that alert going into your PSA? Is it going into an email address? Is it going to
Mhm.
a co-managed client? Is it going into Microsoft Teams? We're transforming that messy, hard to reach configuration data into a centralized data asset that you can actually trust and know that, hey, it's being updated automatically for me on a daily basis.
Mhm.
So it's not reliant on when was the last time Joe went in and updated the documentation. Because as a former VCIO, I went into those meetings that the documentation wasn't updated and my rear was handed to me.
Mhm.
And that's never a good place to be when you're trying to be that CIO type level, that VCIO for that organization, that account manager. You want to be able to go in and know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Liongard gives you the data, so you're always in the know.
that's great. Um, Greg has a question. Are there any plans roadmap to integrate Okta as an inspector type? I didn't see it as an option.
Okta is not currently. If we go to ideas, I've heard it before. So I will drop. Oh, there is no chat, but
You can drop it to everyone there, I think.
I can drop it. I think to everyone.
Yeah.
Nope, I can only drop it to the host and panel.
Okay.
So there is.
Here, I can answer that, friend. Are you referencing the ideas board?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just posted it here. You can copy and paste it out to everybody.
Yeah.
But with the ideas portal, go in there, vote in for it. Each email address gets 20 votes. I'm not saying encourage other people that you know that are facing similar issues to go vote as well, but definitely get them out there to vote. Our development team uses this ideas portal to figure out what's next. Let's be honest, a lot of our dev team, they're not former MSPers. They don't know what's hot. They don't know what's current in the MSP industry.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of our team members did come from the MSP, which is probably why we do so much that we do already that impacts the MSP in a positive way. But
Yeah.
definitely utilize that ideas portal, get your votes in, add comments. The more information you can provide to help us get it to be a reality, the easier it's going to be.
Absolutely. And that's where product-led, community-led products are definitely taking the course. Liongard is fantastic. I wish I had my hands on it when I was previously at an MSP, because having that unified visibility into all of your managed systems and your environments is quintessential for you to not only go into those QBRs confidently, but also the day-to-days, picking up those client calls or jumping into those client tickets and seeing exactly on that timeline what happened, what occurred, when, why. It's amazing the amount of data that's collected, and then you to then automate. And it's just up to you to really figure out what matters most to you. And that's where I think this is the better together speech, the spiel here is where automating billing reconciliation and finding your quote unquote source of truth through those custom metrics. This is where unified visibility meets unified billing reconciliation with thanks to Liongard. So it's really exciting stuff. I appreciate everyone's time here, taking an hour out of their day. I really appreciate it. This is our first pilot at Nerdy Birdy. Again, it's going to be every third Tuesday of every month. We're going to be diving into getting into the nitty gritty with Nerdy Birdy across all of our synthesized vendor partners and channel partners. And we want to hear from you too. So if there's obviously this is a pilot, some hiccups along the way for sure, but we want to hear from you. What matters most to you? What do you want to hear? Is it PSA configurations? Is it more vendor partner integrations, as far as like taking a deep dive with our current synthesized partners? What is it? Like, what's holding you back from really taking full advantage of our billing platform? Maybe it's features. Again, we want to have this success focused webinar for you. We want to hear from you, even if it is ugly, because let's face it, we are a startup and there are going to be some hiccups along the way too. But again, we're in the business to make your lives easier. And again, we want to hear from you. So I'll stop it there. I think we're running at the end of our time. Thank you so much again for your time. Thank you, Scott, the Nerdy Birdy himself, jumping on to this call. I'm going to go join the Nerdy Birdies outside here, my campsite. And you all have a fantastic day, and we'll talk soon. Take care, everyone.